I've been thinking about lawn bowls lately. It's the only reason I'm thinking about it. I'm not planning to do it, but I turn 80 in 6 months' time, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I'm not going to be playing bowls. I might continue doing a little bit of singing. I don't do a lot. So it's really lovely to be here this afternoon to share some of my favourite songs, and it's equally lovely to be able to sort of play with Marcus and Garry. We've done quite a lot of recordings and had a bit of fun over the years. Last week we were in Woy Woy. That's one of the highlights of my career. But I have performed in many places. So we're going to have a bit of fun, as I said, and do some of my favourites. We jump around a bit, so there's some bush songs and there's some city ditties. But getting old, you know, is a bit weird. I don't feel 80, I feel about 70, which is just as bad. And, you know, your body's sort of like you're maintaining it all the time, and I always laugh because, you know, the memory's still here most of the time, so that's pretty good. But I remember a friend of mine, her husband died, and she was really determined to get the last word in, and she organised a séance. And apparently she told me, they were all seated around the table, holding hands, trying to make contact with her ex-husband. And they weren't getting anything. There was nothing happening. Then all of a sudden, she heard this shuffling sound. And she said, "Bert, is that you?" And this voice lofted over the room saying, "Yeah." And she said, "Bert, what's it like on the other side?" And he said, "We get up in the morning about 7:30 and then we have sex till morning tea about 11 o'clock. And then we have sex till lunchtime about 1 o'clock. Then we have sex till afternoon tea about 3 o'clock. Then we have sex until dinner time. And it just keeps going." And she said, "Bert, heaven sounds fantastic." And Bert goes, "Heaven? No, I'm a rabbit in Dubbo." Okay, here's a song about getting riper. I don't say older, I say riper. Like an old beautiful peach till you fall off the twig. Okay. It's an alphabetical song. A is for arthritis and B for bad back. C is for chest pain, was it cabbage or cardiac? D is for dentistry, decay and decline. And E is for eyesight, I can't read the top line. F is for flatulence and fluid retention. G are those gases I'd rather not mention. H for high blood pressure, I is for itches, and J the bad joints that I cover with my breeches. Wearily, so wearily we go, it's not much fun getting older, you know. But roll it on down, send it to me. The alternative's not fun, oh, I'm sure you'll agree. That's the chorus. K is for knees, all knobbly and bent. L is libido, I think mine is spent. M is for memory, haha. You know what's his name? And N is for nerves and that terrible neck pain. O is for for osteo and joints that go crick. P are the prescriptions we have to buy every week. Q is for queasy, I think I feel sick. And R is for reflux, one meal turns to 6. Wearily, so wearily we go. It's not much fun getting older, you know. But roll it on down, send it to me. The alternative's no fun, well, I'm sure you'll agree. S is for sleep, I wish I'd get some. T is for tinnitus, I can still hear that hum. U is for urinary and problems that flow. And B is that terrible vertigo. W is for illnesses still not found. X is that, L is for what? X-ray and that great ultrasound. Y is for years, another one I've survived. And Z is for zest, thank God I'm alive. I've been collecting songs, singing songs, writing about songs, blah, 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 for just over 60 years. I started very young. I did my first ABC program when I was 22, and I've been on the ABC ever since. I'm the expert. Not that good, I'm the expert they bring in when they can't find an expert. So if you want to know about chocos, convicts, dunnies, bushrangers or whatever, they end up bringing me up. Here's a song that I put together about 50 years ago called Tumba Bloody Rumba. It's the drovers, the itinerant workers in the bush, they love to skite. They always reckon they were the best, and this bloke was no exception. He looked for work at muster time. We tried him as a rider, we tried him as the roustabout and as the cook's off cider. He said he'd sail the 7 seas, he'd been down in Alaska, he'd been in every western state from Texas to Nebraska. He said he'd shore a sheep or two and cut a bit of lumber and waged war with the kangaroos at Tumba Bloody Rumba. Oh, we tried him as a shearer, we tried him as a stacker, we tried him digging rabbits out, he wasn't worth a cracker. He had a shop in Singapore, he owned a whirl and lugger. He was a chap at Baccarat, Australian rules and rugger. Now he sent in shore a sheep or two and cut a bit of lumber and waged war with the kangaroos at Tumba Bloody Rumba. Oh, he never showed his aptitude at jobs he was allotted, but showed his skill upon the booze and cigarettes he blotted. He said he'd climbed the Matterhorn, he'd been a union leader, and years ago in Adelaide he was a pigeon breeder. He said he'd shore a sheep or two, cut a bit of lumber, and waged war with the kangaroos at Tumba Bloody Rumba. Oh, we tried him digging fencing posts, we tried to find his caper, until that happy payday when he got his piece of paper. I wonder where he is now, perhaps back on the for chasing kangaroo. Bloody ruse and rumba, bloody rumba. He said he'd shore a sheep or two and cut a bit of lumber and wage war with the kangaroos and tumba, bloody rumba. You know, not that you hear many old bush song people like me singing bush songs these days, but you rarely hear convict songs. So I thought I'd include a convict broadside ballad today. You know, I'm fascinated with these story songs that came over with the early settlers or those that came as convicts. There were 168,000 people were transported, and including about 15,000 under the age of 16. Even on the first fleet there was a 9-year-old. It's extraordinary when you think about it. We ended up being quite successful as a nation. America, on the other hand, was settled by religious settlers, and we were settled as a prison. Today we're about 470%, well, their homicide rate's about 470% more than ours. So I think we won. I think we did all right. The convict ballads, you know, reflect an attitude. This one is called The Botany Bay Burglar, or Son, Oh Son, What Have You Done? And they always have this story. They're trying to say that, you know, all right, maybe I was guilty, I was sent here, but one day I'm going to go back. A lot of them didn't. It was a one-way ticket, of course, unless you had rich family back home or you worked for a while after you got your ticket to leave, then you could go back. But this is pretty typical because it's sung in the first person as if I was the convict, right? I was brought up in London town, a place you all know well. Brought up by honest parents, the truth to you I'll tell. Brought up by honest parents, raised most tenderly, till I became a rambling youth at the age of 23. My character soon taken and I was placed in jail. My friends, they tried to help me and get me out on bail, but the jury said, you're guilty. The judge to me did say, we're sending you for 7 long years to that place called Botany Bay. Oh, to see my poor old father standing at the docks. Likewise my poor old mother, a tearing of her grey locks, a tearing of her old grey locks, these words to me did say, oh son, what have you done to be bound for a Botany Bay? And it's son, oh son, what have you done to be bound for Botany Bay? Oh, they put me on a sailing ship one cold December morn. I never will forget the time we went around Cape Horn. The captain, as he passed me by, these words to me did say, oh, you'll rue your quotation left way down in Botany Bay. There is a girl in London town, a girl I know full well, and when I get my liberty, it's along with her I'll dwell, and when I get my freedom, it's married we will be. I'll bid farewell to New South Wales, farewell to Botany Bay, and it's son, oh son, what have you done to be bound for Botany Bay? There are some extraordinary stories from that period that this is interesting. My friend Charlie down here has a book in his hand. Hold it up. It's called The Old Bush Songs. Banjo Patterson, around the time he wrote, you put it down now, but it's a good book. By the time he'd written Waltzing Matilda and The Man from Snowy River, there was a renewed interest in the bush, particularly because the population in Australia was moving into the cities, because that's where the work was in commerce and manufacturing. And Patterson wrote through the newspapers that he was collecting all the old bush songs. And that book was put out in 1905, and I was fortunate enough to do the 2005 centenary edition of it. But the thing that interested me about it is that Patterson didn't include any convict songs at all, because people believed in the convict stain, that it was a bad thing. Now we celebrate it, and of course in the bush in its heyday, in the second half of the 19th century, people would never say to a fellow itinerant worker, like a shearer or a drover, you know, where are you from? Never ask where you come from, because you could have had the convict stain. The convicts survived somehow or other. After the gold rush, that big defining point in Australia in 1851, because in the course of 25 years our population just boomed. Something like 1.4 million people came to Australia to try their luck with gold. An old bloke I recorded, Rad Dawson, he had the gold fever for a while, and he said to me, plenty of gold in Australia, Warren, but a lot of Australia mixed in with him, he used to say. Anyway, the shearers and the drovers and the farmers took over from the gold. Once the gold petered out and the companies came in and had to dig deep, well, we were on a big economic ride on the sheep's back in particular. And the shearers, so many great stories about these people, but they, like the drovers, were incredibly proud of keeping Australia economically successful. This is a song called Home Sweet Home that is pretty typical of those shearers, because many of them in the old days would get their season's check and they'd say, oh, I'm going to go home and see my sweetheart or my family. And of course they only got as far as the nearest pub, where they were very often lambed down. That was the term. They'd give their check to the landlady or landlord, and the deal was that after 3 days they stopped serving them, and they'd throw them into the dead house, that room at the back of the pub that had 50 blowflies trying to get out and 50 trying to get in, and they'd wake up with a terrible headache. They were given a bottle of rum or brandy or whatever and sent on their way. The only thing that saved them and changed all that was the introduction of the railway. That meant that many of them could hop on a train and go home. But this is a song called Home Sweet Home. The the truth, it's in my song so clear, without a word of gammon. The shearer travels all the year, waiting for the lamb, and he meets his friends, and pretty soon he's trying to party. And where they go, the money's all spent, that's little he is thinking, and it's home, sweet home. That's what he left it for, his home, sweet home. Starts, he hears the price that's going. New arrivals meet old friends, then they start their blowing. They reckon they can shear each day their 100 pretty handy, but 80 sheep's no child's play when the wool is close and sandy. Home, sweet home, that's what they left it for, their home, sweet home. That's your bit. When the shearing season ends, they get their piece of paper to the nearest hotel bar. They cut a dashing caper. They call for liquor plenty, and they're happy while they're drinking. But where to go when the money's all gone? That's little they are thinking. Home, sweet home. That's what they left it for, their home, sweet home. Stop their nerves from shaking. They call for one, they call for two, in a way that's rather funny. Oh, this won't do, the landlord says, you blokes have got no money, and it's home, sweet home. That's what they left it for, their home, sweet home. They're sleeping on verandas, and they're clowning on the sofas, and to finish off their spree, they're ordered off as loafers. Their money's gone, their friends have flown, and habits disappearing. They give 3 cheers to the river bend and jog along to shearing. Home, sweet home, that's what they left it for, their home, sweet home. Frenchman likes his sparkling wine, the German likes his beer, the English likes his half and half because it brings good cheer. The Irishman likes his tot, the Scotsman likes his hot, the Aussie bushman has no favourite drink, so drinks a bloody lot. Here's a story of Bluey Brink, the shearer who would drink anything. There once was a shearer by the name of Bluey Brink, a terror for work and the devil for drink. He could shear his 200 a day without fear, and drink without thinking 10 gallons of beer. Now Jimmy, the barman who served out the drink, he hated the sight of this here Bluey Brink. He came much too early, he left much too late, at evening, in the morning, and round about 8. One morning, while Jimmy was cleaning the bar with sulphuric acid he kept in a jar, along comes old Bluey, a-howling with thirst. Whatever you've got, Jim, just give it to me first. Now it's not down in history, it ain't down in print. This shearer drank acid with never a wink, saying that's the stuff Jimmy will strike me stone dead. This'll make me the ringer of Stevenson's shed. as he turned out the drink. Old Jimmy was shaken with the terrors and fear, too nervous to argue, too frightened to fight. I'm picturing that shearer, a corpse in the night. And the very next morning, when he opened the bar, along comes old Bluey, hollering for more, with his eyebrows all singed and his whiskers deranged, holes in his hide like a dog with the mange. Says Jimmy, hey Bluey, how'd you like the new stuff? Says Bluey, oh it's fine, but it turned any rough. It caused me to coffin, you know I'm no liar. Every damn cop set my whiskers on fire. Old Bill the shearer had been phoned to catch the train next day. He had a shed at Mungandie and an early start for May. So he rolled his swag and packed his bag and he scurried off to bed. But for sleep he could not steal a wink to soothe his aching head. He heard the missus snoring loud. He heard a ticking clock. He heard the midnight train blow in. And he heard a crowing cock. Now, yeah, good. Bill, well, he was in shed number 3. He grabbed the missus in his sleep and he shore her like a ewe. The first work soon was done, then down the neck he flew. As he picked her up and dumped her, down the whipping side he tore. She dare not kick or wriggle, she'd seen him shear before. He was leading Nick the ringer, he was leading Mick the brute, when he picked her up and dumped her like a hogget down the chute. He was staring out the window, half awakened from his sleep, when he saw the missus laying on the footpath in a heap. God blimey, I've had some nightmares after boozing up a treat. And I've walked without no trousers to the pub across the street. But this one takes some beating, and it's one I'll have to keep. I dare not tell me coppers I saw the missus in me sleep. Uabalong is a place out near the Lachlan, out near West New South Wales. You know, there was a time in Australia's history when there were a shortage of women. There were 5 men to every girl. And if you were working out there in those remote stations, I guess the sheep started to look more attractive by the day. There were quite a lot of New Zealand shearers came to Australia. Just point that out. Oh, it's who hasn't heard of you have a long haul. The lads of the Lachlan, the great and the small, come bent on diversion from far and from near, to shake off their troubles for just once a year. There were feelings in plenty, some 2 or 3 small, some wieners shake off their troubles for just once a year. There was kissing and hugging, of course, on the side, and tender emotion when saying bye-bye. And each man he swore he was like as a trivet as he gulped down his 20th rib of gentleman. Oh, who hasn't heard of you and the raw? The lads of the Lachlan, the great and the small, are bent on diversion from far and from near to shake off their troubles for just once a year. The Drovers, you know, they had an extraordinary life, travelling miles and miles with sometimes something like 600 to 1,000, maybe a few more cattle. One of the things they had to do was settle them at night. And after they'd had a meal, the cook took the first watch, and then they'd have turns to look after the cattle so they didn't stampede. You never wanted the cattle to rush, and they used to get a bit spooked, especially by dingoes. You know, the dingoes, I was up in Miles in Queensland a few years ago, and their whole sheep industry up in that area was wiped out by the dingoes. They were ferocious up there. You know, they are the smartest dog, one of them in the world, I think. In fact, I got talking to an old dogger. These are the men that are employed to shoot the dingoes, keep them under control. And he told me that the trick was you had to get them straight through the middle of the skull. And he said it confounded him up there in Miles. He said, I was up there for about 4 days, and I was on the properties, and I could see the dingoes. They'd line up, and we'd have the big flashlights, and I'd aim, and bang! Oh, shit. And in the morning, he said, I'd go up looking for the bodies. No, never found them. He said, then I realised that these dogs were so smart that they'd organise that they'd line up, and every one of them would close their right eye, and the bullets would go whoosh, between them. They're that smart. On another occasion, when I was out collecting out near Walgett, I was walking along a track, and I found this old swaggy sitting on the track, sitting down, and he had a chess set set up on an old orange crate. And on the opposite side was this blue heeler dog. And I knew not to be too forward in these cases. You usually just stand there. I went and I said, "G'day," and he went, "G'day." And I watched them for about 10 minutes. Every time the swaggy would make a move, the dog would look at the chess set, and then he'd nudge a chess piece. The swaggy would look at it, and he'd move a chess piece. The dog would look at it, he'd move a chess piece. And I said to this fella, I said, "Mate, that's a very smart dog you got there." And he looked at me and he said, "I don't know. I win sometimes." You know, one of the things that the drovers did, they had lots of ditties. You know, they used to do ditties that would teach them the brands of the cattle. That was important. So they would do things like, "Oh, the northern brand is NT1. NT1 is the northern brand. Oh, the Killicuddy brand is KKK. Killicuddy brand is KKK. Oh, the farmer he chased his wife with a broom. Oh, the farmer," and so on. Or they do little singing, harmonica, whatever, and they do a little bit of mouth music, I suppose you'd call it, where they're diddling, where they'd go, boogeyman, a boogeyman am I. I am a little boogeyman, a boogeyman am I. I am a little boogeyman, a boogeyman am I. With me diddle idle doodle idle diddle idle dum. Wayne mentioned the Banjo Patterson. I played Banjo Patterson with Max's Henry Lawson for a couple of years, 4 years actually. It was a wonderful experience, and Patterson, of course, was a great writer. He was more humorous than Lawson. Lawson was pretty depressing in many ways. He had a different view of the bush. Both of them fantastic, of course. And they came along at that time that I mentioned where the bulk of Australia started to be in the cities on the coast. So they were looking back at the bush as a romantic sort of place. This is Patterson's song, a bushman's song, he called it, and it's the story of bushmen. Patterson's father had gone broke up in Queensland with his uncle on a property, and then he bought a property out at West New South Wales. He went broke on that, and eventually he got a job managing some properties down near Yass, and let the other bloke go broke instead. Yeah. And I'm a station hand, and I'm handy with the rope and pole, I'm handy with the brand. I can ride a rowdy colt, swing an axe all day, but there's no demand for a station hand along the Castlereagh. And the ship, boy, the ship, there wasn't the slightest doubt. Oh, we'd have to make a ship for the station further out. I saddled up the pony and whistled to the dog, and we went up the country with the old jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog. I took the job of shearing once along the Martha Guy, and the boss said we sheared on Union here. I called it scab, said I. I looked upon the shearing board before I chanced to go. There were 8 or 10 non-union men a-shearing in the row. And the ship, boy, ship, there wasn't the slightest doubt. Oh, I'd have to make a ship with the leprosy about. I saddled up the pony and whistled to the dog, and we left his scabby station at the old jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog. I went to the Illawarra where my brother's got a farm, and he has to ask the landlord's leave before he lifts an arm. The landlord owns a countryside, man, woman, dog and cat, and none of them dare to issue a word unless they lift their hat. And the ship, boy, ship, there wasn't the slightest doubt. Oh, that little landlord God and I would soon have fallen out. Was I to lift my hat to him? Was I his bloomin' dog? No. So we made for up the country at the old jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog. Oh, it's time that I was moving on of a mighty way to go, till we find artesian waters 1,000 feet below, and meet the overlanders with their cattle coming down. We'll work a while, we'll go to town, we'll have a spree in town, and every ship, boy, ship, there wasn't the slightest doubt. Oh, we'd have to make a ship for the stations further out. I saddled up the pony and whistled to the dog, and we went for up the country at the old jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog, jiggity-jog. I spent quite a lot of time in my youth going to the Royal Easter Show. I guess many of you did when it was at Moore Park. I used to love the sideshows. I love that. I've got a whole series of films on my website, all free. There's a 20-minute one on Sideshow Alley. It's with all the freaks and whatever. It's sort of quite weird. There was one I remember called Xena and her performing fleas. She had a flea circus, and she used to advertise it that these little fleas, you'd look through this big glass microscope, and supposedly these fleas were riding bicycles and lifting dumbbells and square dancing and so forth. Buggered if I could see that, but she said that she got all the fleas from the King's Cross flea pit, the picture theatre up there in those days, and she said, and they're just very difficult to train. And I used to sort of laugh at that, the fleas at Madame Zena's flea place. You know, the sideshows always amazed me. There was a lot in the bush, and they'd do anything to get a quid. There was one man who used to charge a shilling, and he had a big sign on the tent saying, come into the tent, 1 shilling, and you'll see the biggest mug in Australia. And you'd pay your shilling and you'd go in, and there was a big mirror there. Yeah. Oh, another one used to have sort of oddities. Like one had this skull of Ned Kelly, and he said, "Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the skull of Ned Kelly." And some shearer looked at it and he said, "Mate," he said, "that's too small to be Ned Kelly's skull." Because you know Ned Kelly's head got stolen, the skull got stolen from the police museum in Victoria. Anyway, he said, "It's too small to be Ned Kelly's head." And the showman looked at it and he said, "Yes, but this is Ned Kelly as a young man." Fleas, yes. You know, we play a little bit of dance music. I was recording Mrs. Colley up in Bathurst in 1973, and she was telling me about a tune called the Varsoviana, the Varsadina. Lovely, pretty tune, and well, she called it the Arse over Anna. But you know, it reminded me that in the old days of the dances they had, the band used to get away with murder. They'd play a tune. They all had dirty words to all these tunes to remind them of the tune. And of course, once the microphones were introduced, they had to stop all that. Anyway, this is what Mrs. Colley did, this thing called Fleas. There's a flea over here and a flea over there. There's a flea over here and a flea over here. Here's another one and another one and another flea here. Here's another one and another one and a flea over here. A tune called Jenny Lind. In the 1840s, the polka was massively popular. And Jenny Lind was the first international star in the world. They named pubs after her. The old cradle the miners used, they called it the Jenny Lind. Anyway, you can hear the polka, how people would dance around the hall. Fiddle in the white cat's eye, and the black cat said, "Gore blimey." That's the name of the tune. Here's a song called The Two Professional Hums. To be on the hum was to be on the bum, swagman who moved around trying to survive in the 1890s and then again in the 1930s. Oh, come on, fellows, and listen to me, chums, and I'll relate to you the story of two professional hums who travelled England, Ireland, all over Scotland too, and took an oath in Bendigo, no more work they would do, no more work they would do, boys, Allambie boys, come and drink wherever you go, sing for the radio, for we are hums and jolly good chums, we live like royal Turks, and if we've luck we'll hum our checks and shoot the man who works. Oh, we asked the lady the other day for something for to eat, a little piece of turkey or a little piece of meat, a little piece of chicken or a little piece of ham, half a dozen loaves of bread and a bucket full of jam, or anything at all, man, cause we're bloody starving, anything to help a couple of jokers on their way, for we are hums and jolly good chums who live like royal Turks, and if we've luck we'll hum our checks and shoot the man who works. Oh, a farmer asked us the other day if we would go to work. I said, what is the work? He said, the cutting of the chaff. I said, what is the payment? $1.50 for some. Well, we said, go shoot yourself, cause we would rather hum than work upon the harvest. Let the cocky starvers hum and drink wherever we go, sing for the radio, for we are hums and jolly good chums who live like royal Turks, and if we've luck we'll hum our checks and shoot the man who works. Oh, to conclude and finish the finish of me song, a song that was composed, me lads, by two professional hums who travelled England, Ireland, all over Scotland too, and took an oath in Bendigo, no more work they would do, no more work they would do, boys, Allambie boys, coming and drink wherever we go, sing for the radio, for we are hums and jolly good chums who live like royal Turks, and if we've luck we'll hum our checks and shoot the man who works. Ah, la 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 We'll do one more and then we'll have a break and a cup of tea in there or whatever, and then we'll be back with some more. But we thought that we'd finish off with a song about Sydney Harbour. There's not a lot of songs about Sydney Harbour. This one is about, I found it in a songbook. The last one I found in Broken Hill from an old bloke. This one I found in a songbook. And I thought, this is a great story, a song about Sydney ferries. You know, around 1900, Sydney had the biggest ferry service in the world. In the world. And then one by one, Sydney Ferries Proprietary Limited brought up all these little companies. But it makes sense when you think, the Harbour Bridge wasn't built. So they had to get around the harbour. And it also coincides, the song, with the introduction of that newfangled invention and popularity of the telephone. When I was a kid, living in Ramsgate, we had a phone and we had a party line. I don't know if many of you remember that, but the phone would ring when somebody down the road was getting a call, and we'd always pick it up. And are you listening to my phone call? Please hang. Look, no. So here's a song from that period called "Take Me Up the Harbour."
2, 3.
Now Gertie's a girl, a sweet little pearl. She works down in the city. She's got a beau, his name is Joe, so handsome and so witty. And each Saturday when he gets his pay, a message soon he's reading. If you're feeling alone, ring me up on the phone. You're just the one I'm needing. And take me up the harbour on a Sunday afternoon to Manly Beach or Watson's Bay, round to Coogee for the day, all around to Clifton or Mossman it will do. Ha! Dear old harbour, Sydney Harbour, they can't beat you. Out on the waves so gently they glide, out on the harbour ferry, then homeward once more, explore where Joe was with his girlie, and out on the shore they kiss once more, and Joe says to his girlie, if you're feeling alone, ring me up on the phone.